I first want to say thank you so much for the honor of being here. It's been about 12 or 13 years since I actually taught some courses here at Biola, and it's great to be back on campus and to connect with what you're doing. It's not often that I have opportunities lately to be with groups of Christians in the arts, and it's so good to be able to say art and Jesus in the same sentence. However, it is almost cruel to have only one day together on such a big topic, to start this immense conversation about creativity in the brain for such a short time. But hopefully the contacts that we've made and the conversations that we've had will continue in other places, in other ways, with new conversations, new collaborations, I hope, mutual support and renewed courage. Thank you to all who have been preparing and organizing. I'm staying with Barry and Beth Krama, so I know the blood, sweat, and tears behind this event. And thank you also to those who have been presenting and participating today. It's so feeding for me to hear you. Conferences and academic symposiums are for some of us like stepping into foreign land after being in the studio for a long time. But to find people gathered who not only speak our language but get us is always a sweet surprise and a welcome gift. I think I can speak on behalf of all the artists and creative people in this room, which means everyone, how appreciated and how needed it is for people like Scott and Carolyn, his co-author, to write about the creative mind, to not only help others understand a little more how our twisted heads work, but for us to know a little better about why we do what we do. And also to gather like this, to celebrate with enthusiasm people like Leah, who can bring healing to a community of people by using art for social action, and shows by her person as well as her work how being interested in life is so important, how being interested in how things work and don't work matters, and asking the questions such as, how can things be changed? And how Kyle can take a slice of cardboard and make magic happen, coughing on all of us. I hope there's an epidemic, an outbreak, a plague, and the enthusiasm of what he called his churning and burning. May we all come down with this as soon as possible. And how Matthew can tell a story and enchant a whole generation of the young and the young at heart. And how, hang on, get on here. And how he can, through the work he does with his company, show us through his process to not rely on the product or on great ideas even, but on people, process, and perseverance. Creating, I loved his word, brain trusts, which are basically critique, which I find working with community arts programs are central to growing up artists in the community. And we can appreciate even more all the artists in the exhibition who have exposed themselves in a situation where everybody is alert to realize and think about how their brains are really working to make what they make. Lynn, Steve, Olga, Kyle, McLean, thank you for your show. It was great. And for the music that was here gifted to us. It's a gift. Everything is a gift. And I am in a situation, and I have been for a long time, where I am devoid of these gifts, so I am receiving them with all my heart. Thank you to all of you for what you have shared of yourselves with us and with me. Thank you for using and giving your gifts, and for all the hard work it has meant in your lives on your craft and on yourselves to bring you to this particular moment with us. And to those of you in the room who in this day are not particularly visible, but who have been writing songs and poems and dancing and beating drums and mixing paint and building buildings and designing clothes and acting and teaching and telling stories, or who are cooking and cleaning and arranging furniture and cutting grass and typing letters and stocking shelves and selling groceries and collecting data creatively. Thank you. Thank you for being alive, for making order out of the chaos, and for helping us see and hear and feel a little bit better. feel the wonder of this extraordinary, ordinary life we live. Be encouraged in this day as I am to keep going and growing. Where's Scott? Is he still here? No, okay, well, I'm saying to him that when I opened his book, I didn't have to go too far to decide to listen to what he had to say, because he mentioned in the introduction, the creative process is messy. Indeed, these are the lives we live as creative beings, messy ones, and ones that, despite our attempts to clean them up as Christians, I think get even more messy when we start living an honest relationship with God. We are wounded, wild, and wonderful creatures who, in all our evolved intelligence, still just see through a glass darkly, the mystery and wonder of life being a constant surprise, a sustaining delight, a challenging encounter. And those in our midst who dare to enter the unknown and explore the darkness as well as the light, as Trevor's song just gave us, that go into themselves and their work and their explorations and come out with treasures for us in packages we call art or writing or songs, to share and to use, deserve our support, our respect, and our encouragement. Their journey is seldom an easy one, and what it has cost them is seldom balanced by any great earthly rewards. We do not all win Oscars. We do not all get accolades or rewards, at least not here and not now. Barry asked me to talk about the cost of being creative. It's a subject I feel close to, and I can answer with conviction both that it costs us everything and that it costs us nothing. So I want to address both those things in relation to Scott's book and to my own experience of 40 years as an artist and the messy, messy business of learning to not just make but create, to not just create but to be constantly in the process of being created. So first, being creative costs us nothing. The bottom line is that everything I have, all my strength and mental ability, and my possessions and my money, all my time and my energy, all my gifts and my talents are from God. Mother Teresa said the only thing we own is our will, and it's the only thing God asks us to give up. Our talents, which are from Him, He doesn't ask us to give up, He asks us to invest. There was a time when I was a young Christian when artists who became Christians were told to give up their talents, which were vain, go to Bible school, and maybe in the end they could sing for God. It's funny to say it now, but I spent 15 years trying to figure out if I was allowed to be an artist when I grew up. Finding out in the end that I'm not just allowed to, but I'm responsible to be who I am. There was no symposium, no community of artists to encourage my walk at that time, to help me believe who I was as a creative being. And on top of that, when I did try to do things for God, offer Him my gifts and talents, it felt like He was cutting off my hands. I kept trying to be involved in various Christian ministries, and nothing seemed to be a fit. I did a lot of drawings and paintings at the time of severed limbs. I was trying to love God with all my heart, I really was, but I didn't know that He loved me. At one point, after years of this struggle, I was staying with friends after having lost another of my many potential jobs in Christian ministry at the time, and when everyone was out of the house, I spent some time in prayer. By now, I was feeling so rejected, I could hardly approach the Lord except to ask, why and what now, and to whimper. My hands at the time, still really vivid to me, this memory, were closed in fists as I was praying, not aggressively, but protecting myself from yet another amputation. But this time, as I knelt there crying, I felt as though, and it's nothing spooky, but I felt as though I had a piece of broken pottery in my hand, like a little shard of clay. And at the same moment, the scripture went through my mind, I don't desire your fatted rams or your sacrifices, but a broken and a contrite heart, saith the Lord, Psalm 51. I knew that I had to open my hand and offer God the brokenness. And when I did, for the first time, I felt his overwhelming acceptance and pleasure in what I gave him. And then I was really crying, of course. Amos 5:22 says, though you offer me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I won't accept them, nor will I regard your fatted peace offerings. Take away from me the noise of your songs or your art. For I will not hear the melody of your stringed instruments, but let justice run down like a river and righteousness like a mighty stream. I kept being told by the Christian community to give my talents to God to use, but he didn't want them. And if he didn't want them, it meant to me that he didn't want me. And we continue to feel this way as artists when our work is rejected, because who we are is connected so closely to our creative productivity. It feels like we are being rejected. But this is not how our loving Creator works. God didn't need my talents. They were his anyway. He wanted me to know that they were not my talents to give. I could, as Mother Teresa said, only give him my will, my brokenness, and my desire to serve. In the story of the talents, even though there was one, and even though one had 10, one had 5, and one had 1, all were asked to invest the same. They were all asked to invest what they had. It was not about giving up their talents, it was about using them. Whether we have 1 or 5 or 10, as the story goes in Matthew 25, our reward is in the act of obedience to do something with them. And in the end, they were not being commended for the profit, the size of the profit, but that they had been obedient in the first place, because the increase is also the Lord's, 1 Corinthians 3. And sometimes I think, who is to say in that story of the talents, if the one talent that was buried was actually the most important one for that time? Because we always think of the guy with the 10 had he was the one. But who's to say that that one talent was the most important? It was not that this wretched, poor, one talent only pathetic individual failed, but that he had been entrusted with something unique and special, and therefore the master was so disappointed that he didn't use it. It's difficult when you feel you don't have much to offer, when you feel that you are or what you have is not enough. It's easier to just hide it away and to crawl in the hole after it. Well, I wanted to be enough. My ego wanted to be more than enough. But perhaps the second most important lesson that I learned in my life with God as an artist was that not enough is enough. My favorite part of the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with the boys' lunch of the 5 loaves and 2 fish is that he first asked his disciples to take an inventory to find out how much there was to feed everybody. He knew there wasn't enough, but he needed them to know. And of course, they came back to report, well, there's not enough, only this small lunch. I think it was the lesson of the day for the disciples, not just that Jesus was able to feed all those people, but that he could use what little they had. They're not enough to do it. They had to know they didn't have enough to do the job. They had to also know if they gave what little they did have to him, he would bless it and break it, another story, and multiply it. Not enough really was enough, more than enough with leftovers. In 1987, I won a National Film Award for a little animation that I did. And for the first time, I had money to go to Europe. I was able to attend with a Dutch friend who wasn't an artist, Documenta, which some of you know of, kind of a quintessential contemporary art exhibit that happens every 4 or 5 years in Kassel, Germany. After the first day of looking at the work, I came back to the hotel absolutely devastated. I told my friend, who, as I said, wasn't an artist, how I felt that I could never become as strong or powerful as the artist that I saw that day. I had started too late to do my degrees in art. I felt so absolutely miserable in the face of this amazing work. There was a big self-pity party going on. My friend, in her straightforward country wisdom as a farm girl, said to me, "Betty, perhaps you don't need more power, perhaps you need more grace." Okay. Another lesson in not relying on my own strength or talent. I had to rely on God's ability to multiply what I had in the time that I had. Again, all I was required to do was to let him bless it and break it, to break me, to humble me. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord, Zechariah 4. My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness, 2 Corinthians 12. And so at this level, to be who I am, to do what I do, costs me nothing except my will, my willingness. Not being or having enough or giving enough is not part of the equation, just being who I am. And for some of you, this might be the day that you say for the first time to yourself, to others, or to God, I am an artist, which may or may not mean you're a painter or a singer, but you know you are a creative individual in how you think and how you live. Own it and celebrate it. There is an interesting transformation that happens once you totally know you're nothing, have nothing. Everything becomes possible at that point. There's no limit to your creative possibilities. But I get it, and I want to read you one of my pathetic moments in one of my journals that I dragged out. I am nothing. I am as nothing as nothing. I am insignificant. I am as insignificant as a discarded worm, winding its way under some rotting log in the forest, invisible and unwanted. I'm empty-handed. I'm handless. And when one's hands are empty, when one has no hands even, people pass you by, walk over you. I have learned from this that I am only wanted for what I carry, and that there is no desire in this dark abyss of humanity for one who is seen to be carrying nothing and is therefore nothing. When someone feels this way, there is no point in telling them that it's not true. But we can tell them, and we can tell ourselves, that these are just the facts. The truth is that God actually chooses the foolish and the weak, 1 Corinthians 1. He takes what is empty, the ones who have been emptied of their ego, their enoughness, and they are the ones that get the job of carrying the light. Don't you dare bury that light, that possibility of being creative, because the world needs it. It needs you. And consider God's goodness and abundant generosity, even when we are still living in the dirt. Perhaps my favorite encounter in Scripture is when God speaks to Jacob in Isaiah 41, and I know I'm paraphrasing, but read it and you'll see it. He basically says, "You worm, Jacob, you worm, take my hand." This incredible invitation is the whole essence of our relationship to God through Jesus. The impossible made possible, the worm holding God's hand and transformed, not just into a butterfly, but a new creature altogether. So what does it cost? It costs nothing. It's a free gift. And what do we get? We get everything, a rich, creative, abundant new life. Jesus said, I have come that they might have life, that they might have it more abundantly. So it costs us nothing. But secondly, it costs us everything. Even before we look at how this plays out in our lives as artists of faith, if the 10 things Scott mentioned in his book as characteristic of creative people are true, that they must engage in imaginative play in a world that regards play as a secondary activity to something we call work, that creative people have passion where following the status quo is considered more efficient and proper, that they daydream, which we all know is just a waste of time, and require solitude, just proving those artist types are unsociable geeks and weirdos, that they often depend on their intuition, which is, well, just like flaky. And they are open, sometimes way too open, in some people's opinion, to new experiences. And if creative people are mindful and sensitive, sometimes translated moody and in misogynist way, feminine, and that they can basically make lemonade out of their suffering, which really annoys people. And if they continually think differently than others, well, then it stands to reason, as well as intuition, there's something going to happen, there's going to be trouble. And we know, most of us by experience, that we just don't always fit into the standardized boxes of daily life. Creative children have trouble at school, and that's creative children all the way to postgraduate school. Creative people have trouble at work. Creative people have trouble in their religious communities and at home. And creative people have trouble with themselves. Many of us have more than once wished we were an accountant instead of a painter. But a creative accountant would have similar issues. I watched a bird crash into a patio window once, and I thought, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just flying the way he was built to fly. It was the glass box set up in his forest that was the problem. And we could linger on that for a long time. But it's related to something that I heard an architect once say that I just love. He said that after he builds a building, he waits for several months, watches where the people walk in a natural way to find the door, and then he builds a sidewalk under the path that they made. Whether we are aware that we are creative beings or not, we are so often forced to walk on straight paths that are unnatural or fly into walls that shouldn't be there. And when our whole being is wired to fly outside the box and to not walk in straight lines, life can become a very big challenge. And when we crash and fall, we are called stupid or careless or mentally unstable, and we call ourselves stupid, and we give up flying and sometimes even just walking, and we go back to being a worm. Hopefully a day like today and research such as Scott has done will help us see ourselves more positively and coax us back up into the light. Emerging artists in North America, especially, who enter the art scene with their MFA in their hand and find out that there is really only space for not even the top 10 art stars, are left to manage their lives, their art lives on their own, and do jobs that are completely unrelated to their art practice in order to pay their rent. Unlike other professionals who get paid for what they're trained to do, the plumber for his plumbing, the doctor for his doctoring, the artist must often work as a waitress or some other unrelated job and not get paid for what they're trained and wired to do. This is such a great discouragement to many young artists that they give up altogether or they sell themselves to the commercial market. And that's not to say that the market or selling are bad things, but often it is at the expense of one's creative being. To carve yourself into a square peg for the square hole when you are a round peg is painful, to say the least. I could go on for hours about the need for encouraging and mentoring artists who have no place to show their work and no one to talk about it. I've developed a community education program that I'm very passionate about in this regard, and mentoring is something that I hope that more mature artists than ones that are here, some of you, will consider a little more carefully, spending more time doing. But all of us have the ability to encourage young artists in so many ways. Yet it doesn't matter at what stage of development one is. For almost all artists, it's difficult to maintain personal integrity and also keep food on the table. It is difficult to keep believing that what we are doing and who we are is worthwhile. With our value systems and definitions of success in our culture so wrapped around fame and fortune. Part of me wanted to, you wouldn't believe how many pages and millions of stories I cut, but part of me wanted to tell you some of my many stories of the ways my choice to be an artist has cost me something. Jobs and people and places to live, to the point of being without a home on more than one occasion. I like to report, as of January the 1st, I have a roof over my head again. There are so many stories to tell, and we all have them. But it is the things like self-righteousness, arrogance, and greed that I still need to give up in order to be truly creative that seem more important to talk about. And to make the point that I am not only a maker, a creator, but I am constantly being made by my Creator, transformed day by day by the renewing of my mind, Romans 12:2. And to say with conviction what a gift it is to be able to not just rely on my own cranial complexities and frailties, but that I can also have the mind of Christ and the simplicity which is in Christ, 2 Corinthians 11. Because art, the kind of art that is creative, is not just about making things, though that is what I do and have done for 40 years with all my heart. But I think real art is not a learned set of skills. It's not a thing we buy or sell. It's not something we use to illustrate words we're so good at in the Christian community. It's not just a painting or a film or a song, though we use the word art to define all those things we do. Barry sent me a quote of Don Miguel Ruiz, who said, "God, the supreme artist, uses our lives for the creation of art. We are the instruments through which the force of life expresses itself. We express our art in everything we say, everything we feel, everything we do. The creation is ongoing, is endless, is happening in every moment. God creating in me and through me, when I am making things and when I am not able to make things. This is my continual comfort." I've been just the last 4 years without a studio, without a place to live. If I needed that as my way to survive, I would be in trouble. But God works in us both to will and to do His good pleasure, and I've come to learn that whether I'm making or not making, there's still a creative process going on within. Creativity is, when we allow it, the manifestation and expression of this dynamic life in us, the incarnate God, working through our human experience of sight and smell and sound and taste and movement, and extended for some of us, called artists, to a manifest materiality in the things we do and make. Art, and for some kind of polysynthetic language that would give us more than that word to define it, is the mysterious revealed in a dance. It's silence sung in an opera or a rap. It's darkness harnessed and brought to its knees in a poem. It's light released in a painting. Love and pain made manifest again and again in a myriad of ways that happen throughout cultures and centuries, changing and adapting to our technologies and to our knowing. Art displaces and confronts and challenges, and therefore so do artists. And so we have condemned and censored art and artists, imprisoned art and artists, withheld funding for art, mocked it, packaged it, and sold it in acceptable and digestible ways. And yes, art is completely wasteful. The useless pastime for those sensitive, dramatic, passionate people that fly into walls and land unceremoniously, laughing or crying, ruffled and torn, but turning their pain into a melody or a dance. Yes, art is completely wasteful and absolutely necessary. It is the ointment poured from an alabaster box, broken over the feet of Jesus in humility and awe. It is children shouting Hosanna so the rocks can stay quiet. It's the mother lamenting in grief, a cry that pierces the heart as well as the ear. It is song that tears my heart out and a poem that freezes me in my tracks. Emily Dickinson said, "If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, if I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that it's poetry, it's art." So my prayer is for me and for all of us, Philippians 2, 5-8. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. Being of no reputation seems counterproductive for the artist who needs to be seen or heard, but fame and fortune are not our goals, though they may be byproducts of our creative life. And although neither praise nor criticism should affect us, it takes a great deal of maturity to be immune to what others think of what we say, what we do, what we make, no matter what our profession is. So what was Jesus' reputation? It was that he was a friend of sinners and that he went about doing good. And I'm not a biblical scholar, so anybody here can correct me that is, but I looked in all the Gospels and it doesn't ever say he was a friend to sinners. It says he was a friend of sinners, which means that he had earned the right to be called a friend by other people. He wasn't doing the benevolent, tolerant thing of being, I'll be your friend, you poor thing. He had earned the name friend because of who he was and because he went about doing good. So, I'm just going to end by saying to the students and emerging artists and to the creative thinkers in all the fields of art and science, to educators and supporters of all creative ventures, and to myself, I want to end by saying, you worm. You worm. I loved it that Scott's image of himself as a child, he was watching the worms this morning. You worm, stop resisting being who you are. You are an art star, a creative light, and there is room in God's creation for millions of them. You just need to choose what kind of star you are, because there's two kinds. The stars that are there to be seen and admired, or like the sun, the star perhaps of no reputation, so ordinary that nobody even pays attention, the star that burns with passion and compassion, bringing light and life into the world.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.